So, picture this. It's the fall of 1864. The American Civil War has been raging for almost 4 brutal years, and the Union really needs a knockout blow. Well, what happened next was one of the boldest, most destructive, and frankly, most controversial campaigns in all of military history. And this quote from the man himself, General William T. Sherman, really gets to the heart of what this was all about. You see, he didn't just see this as a series of battles. No, he saw it as a powerful act of psychological warfare, a kind of statesmanship, designed to show the people of the South that their government was totally powerless to protect them. So, you have to ask, how did such a radical idea even get off the ground? Well, it all started with a big strategic problem that came right after a major Union victory. Sherman's army had just captured Atlanta back in September of '64, and that was a huge deal. But here's the thing. Holding one city wasn't going to end the war. The main Confederate army was still out there, and the South's will to fight was not broken. They needed something big, something decisive, to finally bring this whole thing to an end. This right here shows you the choice Sherman was facing. The standard military playbook, the official plan, was to take his army and go after the port of Mobile, Alabama. But Sherman thought that was totally pointless. He argued the Union Navy already had that port bottled up. So instead, he proposed something that sounded, well, kind of crazy. He wanted to completely cut his army loose from all its supply lines and march 300 miles east, right through the heart of Georgia, living entirely off the land. Now, this wasn't some reckless, off-the-cuff idea. Oh no. Sherman did his homework. He pored over Georgia's census records to figure out exactly where the food was, where the farms and supplies were that could feed his massive army. He made the case that it was totally doable, even in the winter. He had to work hard to persuade his good friend General Ulysses S. Grant, and eventually he got a very reluctant, very skeptical okay from President Lincoln himself, who was terrified of what might happen if this huge gamble failed. And with that green light, Sherman got his forces ready for this incredible march deep into enemy territory. Just let that number sink in for a second. 60,000 soldiers. An entire army about to intentionally sever its own lifeline, its connection to all of its supplies, and march straight into the unknown. I mean, the sheer scale of this was just mind-boggling. And to handle a force this big, Sherman organized it like a genius. He split the whole army into 2 powerful wings, a right wing and a left wing. They would march on parallel routes, which meant they could cover a much wider area, find more food, and really maximize the psychological shock on the entire state of Georgia. So how does an army like this survive? Well, the key were its foragers. They quickly got the nickname bummers. Now, officially, there were rules about what they could and couldn't take, but let's be honest, those rules were often ignored. For the people of Georgia, these guys became the face of the march, systematically taking pretty much anything the army could possibly use. All right, so let's look at how this all played out on the ground, as this army just rolled relentlessly across the state. Okay, so on November 15th, the army leaves a smoldering Atlanta in its rearview mirror and heads east. And man, they moved fast. They crushed a militia force at Griswoldville, the state capital at Milledgeville just gave up without a fight, and in about a month, an entire month of marching and foraging, they were knocking on the door of their final target, Savannah. You might be thinking, wait, where was the Confederate army? Why wasn't there more of a fight? Well, that's the crazy part. The main Confederate force out west, led by General John Bell Hood, had actually marched north into Tennessee. Hood was betting that Sherman would have no choice but to chase him. But Sherman called his bluff. He sent a smaller army to go deal with Hood, which left the entire state of Georgia wide open and pretty much defenseless. And this chart just shows you how defenseless it really was. At a place called Griswoldville, a group of Georgia militia, we're talking mostly old men and young boys, bravely but very foolishly charged a line of veteran Union soldiers. It was a slaughter. Just look at those numbers. Over 600 Confederate casualties to just 62 on the Union side. It was a heartbreaking, lopsided disaster. But the march had its own incredibly dark moments too. Thousands of enslaved people freed themselves and followed the Union Army, seeing it as their only road to freedom. But at a place called Ebenezer Creek, a Union commander, Jefferson C. Davis, worried they were slowing him down, so he ordered the pontoon bridge pulled up right after his troops crossed, leaving hundreds of people stranded on the other side. In the panic, many tried to swim across the icy water, and they drowned. It is a truly terrible stain on the legacy of this campaign. So after a full month on the move, Sherman's army finally made it to the coast, to their ultimate goal, the crucial port city of Savannah. Now, the key to taking the city was this place, Fort McAllister, which guarded the southern river approaches. On December 13th, Union soldiers stormed the fort in a quick, brutal assault. Capturing it was absolutely critical because it opened a direct line to the Union Navy and its supply ships. The Army's long, dangerous isolation was finally over. So inside Savannah, the Confederate commander, General William Hardee, he knew the writing was on the wall. His small force couldn't possibly hold out. He had seen what happened to Atlanta, and he did not want his beautiful city destroyed in a long, drawn-out siege. So he made the tough call to abandon Savannah and retreat with his men into South Carolina. And with the city in his hands, Sherman sent what has to be one of the most famous telegrams in American history. He wired President Lincoln directly and offered him the city of Savannah, along with 25,000 bales of valuable cotton, as a Christmas present. The incredible, audacious gamble had paid off in the biggest way possible. The march itself was over, but its impact, its legacy, would echo for generations, and it's something that is still fiercely debated to this very day. So, what did the march really accomplish? Well, it did exactly what Sherman wanted it to do. It completely shattered morale in the South. It proved that their government couldn't stop an enemy army from marching wherever it wanted. It destroyed food supplies, and hearing about the chaos back home caused soldiers to desert Robert E. Lee's army in Virginia. Bottom line, it broke the South's will to keep fighting, and it almost certainly shortened the war. And this really sums up the two sides of the coin. In the North, Sherman was a hero. His brilliant, if brutal, strategy was celebrated for bringing a terrible war to a faster end. But in the South, he became the ultimate villain, a symbol of pure destruction. His name literally became a curse word for generations. And that really leaves us with this final, tough question. By making war on the civilian population that was supporting the Confederate armies, was Sherman's march a brutal but necessary evil to end a horrible war? Or was it a strategy that just went too far, that crossed a moral line we should never cross? That's the question historians, and really all of us, are still grappling with.